Is the power.
Marley played his final show on September 23, 1980 in Pittsburgh. During the soundcheck, he sang Queen's Another One Bites the Dust over and over. He asked a close friend of his to stay near the stage and watched him in case anything happened. The remaining months of his life were an extended farewell as he sought treatment, first in Miami and then in New York. Cindy Breakspear, Marley's main companion in the mid-70s, remembered his famed dreadlocks becoming too heavy for his weakened frame. One night, she and a group of women in Marley's orbit, including his wife Rita, to whom he had remained married despite it being years since they were faithful to each other, gathered to light candles, read passages from the Bible, and cut his dreadlocks off. Drafting a will was probably the last thing on Marley's mind, as his body, which he had carefully maintained with long afternoons of soccer, rapidly broke down. Marley was a Rastafarian, subscribing to a millenarian Afrocentric interpretation of scripture that took hold in Jamaica in the 1930s. By conventional Western standards, the Rastafarian movement can seem both uncompromising and appealingly lax. For Marley, dealing with his estate probably signified a surrender to the forces of Babylon, the metaphorical site of oppression and Western materialism that Rastas hoped to escape. When he died in Miami, his final words to his son, Stephen, were, "Money can't buy life." "This will business is a big insult," Marley's mother, Cedella Booker, told a Washington Post reporter in 1991, as his estate navigated its latest set of legal challenges. "God never limit nobody. Jah never make no will." Neville Garrick, a close friend who designed many of Marley's album covers, mused in the 2012 documentary Marley that it may have been the singer's final test, one in which everybody revealed who they really were. You get me? Who really did love him, who fighting over the money. It would have been out of character for Marley to neatly divvy up his property, so Bob left it open. No one metric captures the scale of Bob Marley's legend, except perhaps the impressive range of items adorned with his likeness. There are t-shirts, hats, posters, tapestries, skateboard decks, headphones, speakers, turntables, bags, watches, pipes, lighters, ashtrays, keychains, backpacks, scented candles, room mist, soap, hand cream, lip balm, body wash, coffee, dietary supplement drinks, and cannabis, wallflower as well as oil that bear some official relationship with the Marley estate. There are also lava lamps, iPhone cases, mouse pads, and fragrances that do not. In 2016, Forbes calculated that Marley's estate brought in $21 million, making him the year's sixth highest earning dead celebrity, and unauthorized sales of Marley's music and merchandise have been estimated to generate more than $500 million a year, though the estate disputes this. Inevitably, the contention over the estate mirrors the larger struggle over the legacy, over the meanings of Marley. The accounting of merchandise and money might feel like a distortion of Marley's legacy, of his capacity to take the lives of those who suffered and struggled and turn them into poetry. But the range of Marley paraphernalia also illustrates the nature of his appeal. He became a way of seeing the world. Although he adhered to an ordered religious belief system for most of his life, praising Jah, the Rastafarian name for God, whenever he could, he came to embody an alternative for orthodoxy. His lyrics lent themselves to a kind of universalist reading of Exodus and liberation. He was one of the first pop stars who could be converted into a lifestyle. Bob left that open too. In So Much Things to Say, The Oral History of Bob Marley, the reggae historian and collector, Roger Stephens, estimates that at least 500 books have been written about Marley. There are books interpreting his lyrics and collecting his favorite Bible passages, parsing his relationship to the Rastafarian religion and his status as a post-colonial idol, reconstructing his childhood in Jamaica and investigating the theory that his death was a result of the CIA assassination effort. His mother and his wife have written memoirs about living with him, as have touring musicians who were only briefly proximate to his genius. He has inspired countless works of fiction and poetry, and his later years provided the basic outline for parts of Marlon James' prize-winning 2014 novel, A Brief History of 7 Killings. Stephens' So Much Things to Say isn't even the first book about Marley to borrow its title from the 1977 song. Don Taylor, one of the former managers, published a book with the same title in 1995. Stephens was introduced to reggae in 1973 after buying a Bob Marley album. In 1976, he made the first of many trips to Kingston, Jamaica in search of records on lure, and 2 years later, he co-founded Reggae Beat, a long-running radio show on Santa Monica's KCRW. Being an early adopter paid off. 6 weeks after the show's premiere, Island Records offered him a chance to go on the road with Marley for the Survival Tour. In 1981, Stephens co-founded a reggae and world music magazine, The Beat, which was published for nearly 30 years. In 1984, he was invited to convene the first Grammy Committee for Reggae Music. Stephens has made a career out of being a completist, amassing one of the most impressive collections of reggae inferior on the planet, overseeing a comprehensive collection of Marley's early work, the 11th disc, the complete Bob Marley and the Wailers 1967 to 1972, and co-writing the exhaustive 2005 Bob Marley and the Wailers, the definitive discography. At this point, books about Marley tend to be self-conscious about the risks of further mythologizing him, even if they end up going so anyway. Stephens tried to avoid this by framing so much things to say as 400 pages of raw material, drawing from interviews he conducted over 3 decades with more than 70 of Marley's bandmates, family members, lovers, and confidants, some of whom were rarely spoken of on the record. Occasionally, excerpts from interviews and articles from other authors were reprinted too. What emerges isn't a different Marley so much as one who feels a bit more human, given to moments of dividends and whim, whose every decision doesn't feel freighted with potentially world historical significance. Marley was born on February 6, 1945 to Norval and Cedella Marley. Cedella was 18 at the time, a native of 9 Mile, a rural village with no electricity or running water. Little is known about Norval, an older white man who had come to Cedella's village to oversee the subdivision of its land for veterans' housing. He was, according to a member of the white Marley family, seriously unstable, rarely seeing Cedella and Bob before he died, of a heart attack in 1955 at the age of 70. Because of Bob's mixed blood, he was often teased as the little yellow boy, or the German boy. He was described as shy, resourceful, and clever. In 1957, Marley and his mother moved to Kingston, settling in a dense, ramshackle neighborhood referred to as Trenchtown. Marley fell in with a crowd that dreamed of making music. He formed a group with Neville, Bunny Wailer Livingston, Peter Tosh, Beverly Kelso, and Jonah Brightwhite. They eventually called themselves the Wailers, and their sound fused American-style soul harmonies with the island's jumpy ska rhythms. Under the guidance of Joe Higgs, a singer and producer, the Wailers were a local sensation by the mid-60s, but island stardom brought little financial security. After moving briefly to Wilmington, Delaware, where his mother had relocated, Marley returned to the Wailers in 1969, just in time for a revolution in Jamaica music. The jolting, horn-inflected styles of ska and rocksteady were slowing down. Reggae was the new craze. The Wailers continued to record and tour in the early 1970s. A brief but fruitful collaboration with eccentric producer Lee Scratch Perry produced 2 outstanding albums, Sound Rebels 1970 and Soul Revolution in 1971. Beyond a novelty hit or two, cracking the international market remained a distant dream for reggae artists. The distinctive rhythms had crept into American pop music in other forms though. The influential American funk drummer Bernard Purdy credits studio session he played with the Wailers for the reggae feel he brought to early 70s Aretha Franklin classics, Rocksteady and Daydreaming, and the American singer Johnny Nash introduced a pop reggae sensibility in the late 60s and early 70s with hits like Hold Me Tight and I Can See Clearly Now. Nash had gone to Jamaica in search of new sounds and collaborators, and he soon came to recognize it as a hotbed of talent. He took Marley and the Wailers under his wing, bringing them on as an opening act during an English tour in the late 1970s. But Nash left them stranded there, unhappy with the direction of their careers. They sought out Chris Blackwell, the owner of Island Records. Blackwell, who was raised in Jamaica and started his label as a way of exporting the popular music he had grown up with, he gave the band money to return to Jamaica and to record its next album, a slow-burning masterpiece full of spiritual lyricism and expansive grooves. Catch a Fire, in 1973, marked a turning point for the reggae album, as did the decision to appeal to rock fans by adding guitar solos and synthesizer to the album.
In the early hours of this morning, at British time, the body of Bob Marley was laid to rest in a mausoleum in his birthplace, St Anne's, in the north of Jamaica. As the man who popularised reggae music around the world, Marley was the third world's first real superstar. He was just 36 when he died of cancer 11 days ago.
There are a few reasons why oral history has become a preferred format for revisiting the recent past. It's designed to provide open-ended, immersive filibusters, balancing projection with lazy memory, marquee voices with obscure bystanders, a charismatic superstar with the accountant who kept the operation afloat. At a time when quick takes abound, the labor-intensive nature of the farm, as well as seeming lack of writerly voice or perspective, gives the impression of relating everyone's side. It's the perfect approach in the age of the data dump, a way of making room for readers to sift through materials, discover their own resonances, and in case of so much things to say, decide which shady finger-pointing label boss or business manager to trust. Stephens generally resist hagiography. Kelso, one of Marley's lifelong confidants, suggested that he was occasionally rough toward Rita, and that she nearly divorced him. Joe Higgs, the Wailers' early mentor, contends that Marley's mother, one of his biggest advocates after his death, was largely absent during his formative years as an artist, and wanted him to become a welder. Stephens also reprints Archbishop Abonia Yesiak's oft-repeated but never verified claim to have baptized Marley at the end of his life, which would have been a betrayal of his Rastafarian faith. In one particularly engrossing session, Stephens confronts Carl Colby, a documentary filmmaker who had surprisingly unfettered access to Marley in the mid-70s. Colby, whose father was the CIA director William Colby, is at the center of a new far-fetched Marley-related conspiracy theory. Some people believe that Carl Colby dispatched the gunman who opened fire on Marley's home in 1976, shortly before he was scheduled to play a peace concert organized by the Jamaican Prime Minister, Michael Manley, who was seen as an enemy of American interests. There are those who think Colby gave Marley a poisoned boot that supposedly caused his cancer. Colby denies the allegations. In contrast to other popular Marley books, in which every detail merely anticipates the singer's eventual breakthrough, Stephens' contribution is his nerdish menomania. Timothy White's Catch a Fire, published in 1983, remains the gateway biography for the Marley curious, in part because it reads like a novel, full of high-stakes standoffs and tense dialogue. In So Much Things to Say, Stephens fixes more on the mundane details, the date and location of recording sessions, the exact occupation of Marley's estranged father, a ferrocement engineer, not a naval officer, as is often reported, the jug of mysterious juice that Marley toured with in late life. Stephens is largely here to direct traffic, but his authority derives from exhausting every possibility. Two people, for example, offer equally vivid memories of Marley writing I Shot the Sheriff. A former lover claims that the song is an allegory about birth control. One of Marley's white friends described it as a private joke they had about him hanging out with this white guy. The book's drama accumulates around the question of what set Marley apart from his bandmates Livingstone and Tosh, who many in So Much Things to Say thought were at least as talented. Colin Leslie, Marley's business manager, suggests that one advantage Marley had was that he had spent time in America in Delaware and he was exposed to industry and the corporate world. He returned with a sense of how things should be ordered in business. Perhaps it was Marley's desire for a broader, more stable platform that allowed him to accept concessions and others rejected. The original Wailers broke up in 1974 because Livingstone barked at Blackwell's suggestion that they begin playing underground in freak clubs. In Livingstone's mind, their music was for children now, not for gays or people who tinkered with synthetic drugs. Though Livingstone was ousted from the band, he was at peace with his stance. I felt good because I wasn't going to wallow in no shit. End of quote. Tosh left too, fed up with Blackwell's relentless fuckery. Tosh also accused Marley of siding with Blackwell because he was out.
Are you satisfied with the way that your new album and your hit single Johnny Be Good have been promoted in America?
No, that was not my hit single.
It got on MTV and it got on the pop charts.
Yes, that don't make it a hit. That is the shit with the society and the diplomacy in making it look to the people that it is a hit, but to them it is not a hit.
In 1974, Marley reemerged with a new album, Natty Dread, credited to his newly reconfigured band, Bob Marley and the Wailers. In the eyes of many, Blackwell had finally succeeded in breaking apart the band's core. It was easier to promote Marley than Livingstone. With his unrelenting fate, our Tosh, a provocateur fond of referring to the owner of Island Records as Chris Whitewell, or Whiteworth, as Marley's solo career took off, Higgs, who briefly joined the touring band came to see him as a bit of a user. Lee Jaff, known as the White Whaler because he was one of the few white people in the group's inner sanctum, recalls that his friendship with Marley nearly ended when Marley refused to stand up to his label, which changed the spelling of the album title from Naughty Dread to Natty Dread against his wishes. That's Naughty with K-N-O-T-T-Y to Natty with N-A-T-T-Y. There's an argument that the Wailers' true visionary was Peter Tosh, not Bob Marley. Where Marley became a symbol of peace and unity for a troubled nation, Tosh remained combative and politically militant. After the gunmen shot up his home, Marley moved to England in a kind of self-imposed exile. He returned to Jamaica 2 years later to headline the One Love concert, which was an attempt to bring the country together while a bloody political war raged in the streets. In the middle of the song, jamming, Marley invited the rival party leaders Michael Manley and Edward Seaga on stage, and the three of them held their hands up together. It was a powerful image, but for Tosh, who had been on stage hours earlier and blasted both parties, what Jamaicans needed was not peace, but justice. Peace is death, he later explained. Your passport to heaven. Most people don't know that. Unity was false hope. In the mid-70s, Marley found audiences far beyond the sufferers of Trenchtown. One of his friends contends that the singer drifted a little to the right of the Jamaican political spectrum as he came closer and closer to the white and brown Jamaican elite. Don Taylor, his former manager, says that Blackwell turned Marley into a beggar of the jet set. Still, Marley was entering spaces unimaginable to previous generations of Jamaicans who, like him, had come from nothing. He lived down the road from the Prime Minister. He had brought Rastafari, long seen as an outlaw cult, into the mainstream, and he gave freely to those in need. Judy Mowat, a member of the I3, Marley's backing vocalist, explains that he had come to view himself as a reincarnation of the biblical Joseph, who had provided corn to the children of Israel during the famine. We see the work that Bob come back to do now, that he has gathered his people and is feeding the people with a more spiritual corn in this time. End quote. Yet, Marley was troubled by the demographics of his world famous at Milan's San Siro Stadium that drew 120,000 people, more than the Pope had drawn in a week earlier. The Commodores, meanwhile, were on the downside of a career highlighted by the featherweight soul hit Easy and the 3 Times Lady. But they still drew the predominantly African-American audience that Marley craved. His failure to dent the black radio market in America was confident that his live show would eviscerate everyone else. He was right, as Alvin Seco Patterson, the Wailers drummer, recalls. I remember when Bob finished, everybody walked out. When Marley fell ill a few days later, he was about to sign a monumental new record deal with a $10 million advance. That didn't happen. His most famous album was to be Legend, a 1984 hits collection released by Island Records, which has become one of the best-selling albums of all time. His role in turning reggae into a worldwide phenomenon is one of the reasons the category of the world music was invented. In 1987, to help stars break out from beyond America and Europe, many of whom inevitably got described as the Bob Marley of their homeland. And yet, much of the Marley and Wailers story remains untold. Livingston had never allowed Stephens to turn 1,800 pages of interview transcripts into a book. Tosh began committing his life story to audio tape before he was murdered in 1987. The so-called Red X tapes provide the basis for a documentary on Tosh, but have otherwise never been released. The struggle over the meanings of Marley remains unresolved, and no doubt unresolvable. In 1984, just 3 years after Marley's death, the Jamaican producer King Jammy and Wayne Simmet released Under Me Sling Thing, a groundbreaking dancehall single built on a digital rhythm track. This revolutionary sound, as well as brash new stars like Yellowman, made Marley's root style seem antiquated. In Colin Grant's Natural Mystics, an excellent 2011 book about the Wailers, there is a scene in which Livingston finds himself in a concert bill along Shabba Ranks and Ninja Man, roughneck anti-heroes who were known for their violent, sexually charged lyrics. It's a world that the Wailers, outlaws in their own day, enabled, but not the one they created. He's sad and frustrated as the crowd wearies of his slow-burning roots music. One of the reasons Marley's life requires this complication, Stephens' book attempts, is that the singer became a model for how artistic legacy has turned into an industry of its own. He has become a myth, capacious enough to absorb every new revelation. What happened with Marley is what often happens nowadays to charismatic artists who die young. Core beliefs are trimmed and edited for accessibility, and a new simplified consensus forms. A belief system is reduced to a single strident pose. Rebelliousness becomes untamed essence that travels everywhere, imbuing things like lighters and headphones with mystical vibes. Even as the music business thrives, an artist's legacy, especially one that is defiant and uplifting, will continue to be a reliable, ever-renewable asset. At least, it's Marley's family that benefits. Stephens closes his book with a chapter of friends and collaborators sharing their favorite Marley tunes. It's a way of creating a spiritual foundation, in the words of the Wailers guitarist Junior Marvin, that will last for eternity. At the same time, it enables us to imagine Marley's career as an arc extending through the 80s, the 90s and beyond. We believe that he wouldn't have had to change with the times, that he would have resisted whatever was to come, or seen an alternative to it. This is the most intoxicating part of the Marley myth, the dream that someone had the answers, if only he had survived long enough to save.
What is your feeling about the condition of black people here in the United States?
I feel like black people should develop themselves, not to say, well, then just develop yourself having a prejudice thing to it. It's just that we are people with our own history and culture.
Thank you for joining me again, guys. I really do hope you had found this video interesting or informative. If so, and if you'd like to see more of these videos, you can let me know down in the comment section. If you really enjoy these videos, subscribe to Elite Jamaica by clicking the red subscribe button.
Alright. Let's get some fire on our hearts.